widowed at 23, she raised his heirs alone until the Duke returned and claimed them all. Hello readers, welcome to this channel. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you. As you do so, sit back and relax as we dive into this story. Chapter 1. The Burden of Loss and Duty. The wind howled through the narrow windows of the Ashford estate, rattling the ivy that climbed its walls, as if trying to remind Lady Clara Ashford that she was alone. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, but the warmth it offered could not dispel the chill that had settled in her bones since her husband's death. 2 years had passed, and still the wound of Lord Edward Ashford's unexpected passing felt raw, as though time had not been enough to close it. Clara sat by the fire, her fingers gently threading a needle through a patch of fabric. It was a small thing, a repair for Henry's trousers, but it was the only thing she could focus on. Her mind wandered in 1,000 directions at once, from the memory of Edward's laughter to the responsibility she now bore alone. The weight of it was suffocating, raising 2 small children, managing the estate, and keeping the Ashford name alive in the eyes of the ton. But beneath the strength she tried to show, there was a quiet exhaustion gnawing at her spirit. She had become a widow at 23, the future she had once imagined, with Edward slipping through her fingers like sand. Henry, at 5, was still young enough to need her constant attention, while Amelia, barely 3, had started to ask about her father, her innocent questions breaking Clara's heart each time. "Mama, when will Papa come home?" Amelia would ask, her wide eyes filled with an unspoken trust that Clara could not bring herself to betray. She would smile softly and hold her daughter, but inside there was always that unrelenting ache of not being able to give Amelia the answer she craved. The small estate was quiet, too quiet. The silence of the rooms, once filled with Edward's vibrant presence, now echoed like a distant memory. The servants had grown accustomed to Clara's withdrawn nature, respecting her solitude, yet always maintaining a polite distance. The staff were loyal, but their loyalty felt like a reminder of her isolation. And so, she found herself, day after day, keeping the estate in order, managing the bills, overseeing the workers, caring for her children, and doing it all without a single word of complaint. But the truth was, there were moments when she wished for someone to share the burden with, even if only for a fleeting second. It was during one of these moments, as the clock in the hallway chimed the hour, that a servant entered carrying a letter, sealed with the distinctive wax emblem of the Duke of Hawthorne. The sight of it made Clara's heart skip a beat. The Duke of Hawthorne, Roderick Hawthorne, her late husband's older brother, had not been heard from in years. He had disappeared from England shortly after Edward's death, retreating to some undisclosed location abroad to mourn the loss of his younger sibling. There had been rumours, whispers of his broken heart and his refusal to take part in the duties of the estate. And yet, now, after all this time, the Duke was writing to her. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she broke the seal and unfolded the letter. It was short, formal, and to the point, as though he were speaking from a great distance, both physically and emotionally. Lady Clara Ashford, I trust this letter finds you well. I write to inform you of my return to England after a period of absence. As my brother's heir, I find it necessary to address certain matters of family business that require your attention. I shall be arriving at Ashford Manor in 3 days' time, and I expect we will have much to discuss. Sincerely, Roderick Hawthorne, Duke of Hawthorne. The letter fell from Clara's hands, her chest tightening as the weight of the words sank in. Family business. The phrase was an ominous one, carrying with it a sense of duty that left no room for personal emotions. She had no idea what he meant by this, but the very idea of Roderick Hawthorne setting foot in Ashford Manor sent a shiver down her spine. The Duke, who had been absent for so long, now returning to claim what? His inheritance? His brother's legacy? Or something more? Clara's thoughts swirled in confusion. It was not the letter itself that unsettled her, but the implications behind it. She had managed, for the past 2 years, to keep the estate running and the children safe from scandal. But if the Duke of Hawthorne was returning, it could mean the end of that fragile peace. She had never truly known Roderick Edward's elder brother had always been a shadow in the background of their lives, a figure who rarely appeared at social gatherings or family events. When he did, he was distant and cold, a man whose eyes seemed to see too much, but who never let anyone see inside him. Clara remembered meeting him once, shortly after her marriage, and feeling immediately uncomfortable in his presence. He had a way of looking at people that made them feel as though they were being assessed, measured, and found wanting. But now, he was coming to her home, to the place that had been hers, her sanctuary in the aftermath of Edward's death. What could he want with her? With Henry and Amelia? The thought of him taking control of the children, of them being ripped from her arms, filled her with dread. She had promised Edward that she would raise them as he would have wanted, but what if the Duke had other plans? What if his family business meant more than just an inspection of the estate? Clara rose from her chair, her head spinning as she walked toward the window. The view of the rolling hills beyond the estate, bathed in the soft light of the evening sun, seemed so distant now, as though the world outside was suddenly full of uncertainty. She had done everything she could to protect her children from the grief that had consumed her, and now it felt as though the future once so clear had shifted beyond her reach. Her heart beat faster as she thought of her next steps. She had to prepare, to make sure the estate was in order, that the children were well, and that she was ready to face Roderick. But there was a deeper, more personal fear that gripped her. The possibility that this meeting would change everything. What was his return really about? And how would she survive if it meant losing the little family she had managed to create in the wake of tragedy? As the letter burned a hole in her mind, Clara knew one thing: for certain this meeting would define the rest of her life. Chapter 2. The Duke Returns. The day of Roderick Hawthorne's arrival dawned grey and heavy, as if the sky itself were holding its breath. Clara stood at the window, watching the carriage approach, the familiar weight of dread settling into her chest. She had expected the moment of his return to feel monumental, but standing here now, in the quiet of the estate, it felt like a breaking point. The estate, her sanctuary, seemed suddenly too small, too fragile to contain the power that Roderick brought with him. She straightened her shoulders, willing herself to appear calm, though inside, her heart pounded erratically. She had to be strong, for the children, for the legacy she had fought to preserve these past 2 years. As the carriage rolled to a stop, the driver opened the door, and Roderick emerged. Tall, broad-shouldered, his figure cast in the long shadows of the afternoon. There was an air about him, something imposing, something that made the air grow still as he approached the door. His presence filled the space like an uninvited guest, demanding attention. Clara couldn't help but feel a twinge of something she couldn't place, watching him. The years had hardened him, there was no mistaking it. His once youthful face, now weathered with age and sorrow, carried a seriousness that left no room for warmth. He walked with purpose, his every step a reminder of his title, of the power he wielded as Duke of Hawthorne. Clara took a deep breath and forced herself to meet him at the door, just as she had done for all her visitors, but there was no warmth in his gaze when their eyes met, only a cold, calculating assessment. His eyes skimmed her face, taking in the changes 2 years had wrought upon her. "You look well," he said, his voice low and impersonal. "I manage," Clara replied, her tone steady, though the words tasted like dust in her mouth. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, but she refused to flinch. She had learned to face difficult people with courage, even if that courage was feigned. Without waiting for her invitation, Roderick walked past her into the hall, his presence filling the space like a shadow. Clara followed, the sound of his boots against the wooden floor echoing, a stark reminder of the difference between them. He was not here as a brother, not as Edward's kin, but as the Duke of Hawthorne, and that power, that distance, was palpable between them. "I trust the estate is in order?" Roderick's voice broke the silence, crisp and formal. Clara nodded, her back straight, the polite facade firmly in place. "Everything is as it should be." He didn't respond immediately, instead scanning the room as though looking for signs of decay, of mismanagement. Clara watched him carefully, wondering what he was truly here for. The Duke had made no mention of what this family business entailed, but she had a feeling it had less to do with the estate and more to do with the children. "I have brought my solicitor with me," Roderick said after a moment, his tone clipped. "There are matters that need to be resolved. It's time we discuss the children." Clara stiffened, her breath catching in her throat. The children, her children, the ones she had raised alone, the ones she had given everything to in the wake of Edward's death. She could feel a knot tightening in her stomach. "I'm sure you'll find everything in order where they are concerned," she replied, her voice steady, but carrying an underlying firmness. Roderick's gaze sharpened, his eyes narrowing just slightly, as if he were seeing Clara for the first time. "You've done well, Clara," he said, the words laced with an unexpected kindness. But there was a catch, Clara knew. But it is time for them to be raised in their rightful place, with their true family. Clara's heart skipped a beat, the implication sinking in like a stone dropped into a still pond. She swallowed hard, refusing to let the shock show. "Their father's wishes were clear," she said quietly, but with a force that surprised even herself. "Edward wanted me to raise them. He trusted me." Roderick's jaw tightened, the muscles in his neck flexing with restraint. "Your husband is gone, Clara. The children belong with their rightful heir, with their uncle. It is my duty to ensure they are raised with the values that will uphold the family name." Clara blinked, the words stinging. "The children belong with their rightful heir." That was how he saw them, objects to be claimed, passed from one hand to the next. She could feel the anger simmering beneath her skin, but she kept it in check. She had to. "They are my children, Roderick," Clara said, her voice low, almost pleading. "I raised them after Edward died. I gave them love, stability, a home. That matters." Roderick was silent for a moment, his gaze distant, as though weighing her words against something inside him. When he finally spoke, his tone was cold, detached. "This is not about what you want, Clara. This is about what is best for them. They must know their place in society, their duty to the family. You cannot provide them with that." Clara felt her heart constrict, and her breath falter in her chest. "I can provide them with everything they need," she said, the words tasting like a defiance she hadn't known she still had. "Love, security, a future. What more do they need?" Roderick's eyes flicked toward her, studying her with a sharpness that made Clara feel small, vulnerable. "I have nothing against you, Clara," he said, the words clipped. "But I am their guardian now. I will not let them be raised in isolation. They must learn what it means to be a part of something larger than themselves." The conversation had taken a turn Clara had not anticipated. She had known Roderick would not be easy to deal with, but she hadn't expected him to be so determined. Her mind raced, grappling with the reality of the situation. Could she really fight him on this? Could she really stand up to a duke? Her gaze drifted to the staircase, where Henry and Amelia stood, peeking through the banister at the man who was about to alter the course of their lives forever. Clara's heart tightened as she saw them, innocent and unaware of the storm brewing around them. She had sworn to protect them, to give them a life free from the expectations and burdens of the ton. But now, it seemed, Roderick would take that from them. Roderick noticed the children too, his gaze softening just slightly as he watched them, but his resolve remained. "It's for their future," he said again, this time with a finality that made Clara's blood run cold. "I will not let you take them from me," Clara said, her voice breaking free from the calm she had tried so desperately to maintain. The words were out before she could stop them. "I will not." Roderick looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, as though acknowledging some unspoken truth between them. "You will fight for them," he said quietly, "and I will fight for what is best for them." The tension between them was thick, a palpable wall that neither of them could breach. And as Clara stood there, facing the man who would undo everything she had built, she realized with a sinking heart that this was just the beginning of a war she hadn't prepared for. A war for her children, for her future, and for the life she had fought so hard to build. And in that moment, she knew that no matter the cost, she would fight to keep her family intact. Chapter 3. Old Wounds and New Allegiances. The tension in the drawing room was palpable, a storm that neither of them could quiet. Clara stood before the fire, arms folded tightly across her chest, her gaze fixed on the glowing embers as though they might offer some answer to the silent battle raging between her and Roderick. The letter he had written had been clear his intentions for the children were not open to negotiation. But Clara refused to surrender. "I've raised them as their father would have wanted," she said quietly, her voice steady, though the weight of the words carried a deep, aching sorrow. "Edward would never have wanted them to be torn from their home, their life here." Roderick, standing at the opposite end of the room, remained impassive. His tall frame filled the space, his broad shoulders heavy, with a responsibility that, at times, seemed too much for any man to bear. His posture was straight, his hands clasped behind his back, as if he were trying to keep himself from acting on the impulses that flickered behind his eyes. "You mistake my intentions, Clara," he said, his voice low but firm. "This isn't about what you want or even what I want. It's about what's best for the children. You cannot shelter them here forever. They must learn what it means to be part of something larger than themselves." Clara turned sharply, her eyes meeting his, a flash of defiance in her gaze. "And you think taking them away from their home will give them that?" she asked, her words sharp with emotion. "You don't even know them. You don't know what they need." A flicker of something perhaps regret or understanding crossed Roderick's face, but it was gone in an instant. He stepped toward her, his boots echoing softly on the wooden floor, the air between them thick with unspoken frustrations. "I know what they need," he said, voice softening for a moment. "They need stability. They need guidance. And most importantly, they need to understand that they are part of a legacy that must be upheld." Clara's chest tightened, a mixture of anger and heartbreak warring inside her. "This is their legacy, Roderick. This estate, their father's name, and the love I've given them." She swallowed hard, her throat constricting with emotion. "You're not here to give them stability. You're here to take them away from me." His expression softened, but only just. "I am not trying to take them from you," he replied, his voice edged with a weariness Clara hadn't expected. "I'm trying to give them something more than you can provide here, in the isolation of this place. I'm trying to ensure they are raised as heirs to Hawthorne. They are not just children, they are part of a legacy." Clara's heart clenched at his words. But there was something else there, something beneath the stern mask he wore. She could see it now, the weight he carried in his eyes. It was a shadow, deep and unresolved, one that had followed him for years. She didn't know what to make of it, but she didn't have the strength to ignore it either. Roderick's gaze drifted to the window, where the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the estate, There was a silence between them, heavy and pregnant with things unsaid. "You've been absent from their lives for 2 years," Clara said, her voice quieter now, but laced with pain. "And now you want to come back and decide what's best for them? What kind of father figure do you think you can be after all this time?" Roderick stiffened, his jaw tightening as though her words had struck a raw nerve. But when he spoke, there was no anger in his tone, only something deeper, something more vulnerable. "You think I don't know what I've missed?" His voice was quiet now, each word heavy with unspoken years. "You think I don't regret leaving? That I don't regret stepping away after Edward died?" He paused, his eyes meeting hers for the first time, and Clara saw something in them, something she hadn't expected. Pain, real pain. "Do you know what it was like to leave?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "To leave behind everything, to step away from family, from duty, from my responsibilities. I thought I was doing the right thing, that I could escape the weight of my own family's expectations, but all I did was run. I hid from them, from everything." Clara stood still, her anger momentarily stilled by the rawness in his voice. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to admit it to show the cracks beneath his perfect Duke exterior. For a moment, she saw him as something more than just the heir to Hawthorne. She saw him as a man burdened by guilt, struggling to live up to an image of himself that he never wanted. "I never wanted the title," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper now. "I never wanted to be Duke. I never wanted to step into Edward's shoes. But I did. I had no choice. And when Isabella died, I wasn't strong enough to hold the family together. I wasn't strong enough to lead." Clara's heart twisted at his words. For a brief moment, she understood him not as the Duke, not as the man who had come to take her children, but as a man who had lost just as much as she had, maybe even more. "Is that why you left?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible. "Because of her?" He nodded, his gaze distant. "I thought if I stayed, I'd be trapped by my own grief. I thought that the weight of her memory would break me. So, I left. I thought I could forget. I thought I could start over." Clara felt a pang of sympathy for him, but she quickly pushed it down. She couldn't afford to feel sorry for him, not now, not when her children were at stake. "I'm sorry for your loss, Roderick," she said, her voice still soft but firm. "But my children are not your penance. They are not your second chance. They are my children. I raised them. I gave them everything. And I won't just hand them over because you think it's best." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time, Clara saw something else in his eyes. Respect. Maybe even a little admiration. But there was still that distance between them, still that wall he had built around himself. "I'm not asking you to give them to me," he said, his voice steady once more. "But I need you to understand that they have a duty, Clara. They will grow up, and they will have responsibilities, responsibilities that you cannot prepare them for here." Clara shook her head. "You don't get it, Roderick. You think this is about duty. But it's not. It's about love. They have a mother who loves them, and that's more than any title or legacy can give them." Roderick's gaze softened, but only slightly. "I never wanted this life, Clara. I didn't want to be a duke, but I am. And I can't undo what I am." Clara stood there, silent for a moment, the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. She realized that, for all his talk of duty and legacy, Roderick was still running from his past, from his grief, from the man he was meant to be. And maybe, just maybe, they were more alike than she'd ever realized. Chapter 4. The Turning Point. It began with a headache, a dull throb behind her eyes that Clara initially tried to ignore. But by the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the ache had intensified, spreading like a vice around her skull. She had been managing the estate all day, overseeing the staff, reviewing ledgers, walking the grounds with the estate manager. It had been a long day, and though the work was second nature to her now, her body was betraying her. She dismissed the throbbing pain as exhaustion, as she had done so many times before, but as the evening wore on, the pain worsened, turning sharp and unbearable. By the time she went to bed, she felt dizzy, her skin clammy, the world spinning with every turn of her head. Clara lay in bed, her thoughts a tangle of confusion and fatigue, when the door creaked open. She barely had the energy to open her eyes. "It's nothing, Roderick," she murmured, her voice thick with exhaustion. She had hoped to avoid his concern, to handle this herself. She had been managing everything on her own for so long. She couldn't bear the thought of him seeing her weak, vulnerable. But Roderick didn't heed her dismissal. He entered the room slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the floor. He moved with quiet purpose, like a man used to tending to matters of importance, not to the frailty of others. He had been absent from her life for so long, yet here he was, standing at her bedside, his gaze sharp but softened with concern. "You are not fine," he said quietly. His voice, usually so cold and detached, was edged with something else now, something almost tender. "You are pale, Clara. You should have said something." She struggled to sit up, pushing herself against the headboard, but her body betrayed her. The world swayed, and her head spun. She groaned, unable to focus on anything but the crushing weight of the pain in her temples. Roderick didn't hesitate. He moved quickly, his hands gentle but efficient, as he placed a hand on her shoulder to steady her. "Lie back," he commanded, his tone softening despite itself. "You need to rest." Clara didn't argue. She sank back into the pillows, closing her eyes as the room seemed to tilt. Her mind felt foggy, her thoughts scattered. For a moment, she almost forgot that Roderick was in the room, forgot that he had been the man who had once seemed like nothing more than a distant, cold figure. He had always been an obstacle, someone who wanted to take what was hers. But now, in this moment of weakness, he was something else. He was there. She could feel him moving around the room, his footsteps muffled as he opened a cupboard. "I will prepare something for you," he said, his voice steady and calm. It was almost as if the Duke had never left his role as caretaker. The efficiency with which he went about his tasks was unnerving. She heard the clink of glass, the rustling of papers, and soon enough, he was beside her again with a small vial, of something medicine, perhaps. She didn't question him. Her eyelids felt too heavy to keep open. "Drink this," he instructed gently, holding the vial to her lips. Clara blinked, still dazed, but the concern in his voice made her comply. The liquid was bitter, the taste sharp and medicinal, but as she swallowed it, a sense of relief washed over her, if only for a moment. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling the weight of her exhaustion pulling her under. Roderick didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sat in the chair beside her bed, his eyes never leaving her. Clara was too tired to question his presence, too exhausted to argue. But as the minutes passed, she became aware of the way he watched over her quietly, protectively, as though this simple act of care was something he had been practicing for years. She drifted in and out of sleep, the pain fading into a dull throb, but in those fleeting moments of consciousness, she became acutely aware of the change in the air between them. There was no anger, no legal battles, no accusations. Just the presence of a man who, despite his distance and coldness, was tending to her with a tenderness she never expected. It wasn't until the middle of the night that Clara woke again, her fever having spiked. She found herself in a daze, not fully awake, but not fully asleep either. Roderick was still beside her, his eyes heavy with fatigue, but his posture remained vigilant. He had stayed beside her all night, tending to her, checking on her, making sure the children were well cared for in her absence. "You need rest," Roderick murmured, his voice low and soothing. He reached out to adjust the blankets around her, his fingers brushing against her skin in a way that sent a shiver through her. Clara felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but there was something different now. Her defenses had cracked, if only for a moment, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself lean into the comfort of his presence. "I didn't expect you to be here," she said quietly, her voice raw with exhaustion. "I thought you'd leave when the matter was resolved." Roderick's eyes softened, just slightly. "It's not about the matter, Clara," he replied, his tone thick with something more, something vulnerable. "It's about you, and them." Clara closed her eyes, trying to make sense of the words. Was this truly the same man who had fought her at every turn? The same man who had tried to take her children, to take her home? It felt as though she was seeing him for the first time, a man who, despite all his power and control, was still a person burdened by his own grief, his own regrets. "I've never wanted to separate your family," Roderick continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I thought if I didn't step in, you would destroy yourself trying to keep everything together. You refuse to let anyone in, Clara. You push everyone away, even when they're trying to help." Clara's heart skipped a beat. His words felt like a balm to the raw wound of her own guilt. She had been so determined to stand on her own, to prove that she could manage without anyone's help. But in doing so, she had isolated herself, and now, it seemed, she had isolated him too. "I don't want to be a burden," she said, her voice cracking. "I don't want anyone to feel like they have to take care of me." "You're not a burden, Clara," Roderick said firmly. "But you're human, and you don't have to do this alone." His words settled between them, like a quiet promise, a turning point neither of them had expected. For the first time, Clara felt a crack in the walls she had built around her heart, a faint glimmer of possibility. Could she learn to trust him? Could she allow him to be part of their lives, not just as the Duke, but as a man who truly cared for them? As the night wore on, Clara drifted into a peaceful, fevered sleep, and Roderick remained by her side, watching over her like a silent guardian. When Clara woke the next morning, the fever had broken. She felt better, but there was something different in the air, a quiet understanding that had not been there before. Roderick had stayed, not because it was his duty, but because he cared. "I can't do it all on my own, Roderick," she said softly as he entered the room with tea for her. "I realize that now." He nodded, his expression serious. "Then let's do it together." And in that simple exchange, a new beginning had started. Their relationship, once strained and full of obstacles, had shifted. Perhaps, together, they could raise the children and honor both the past and the future in a way that neither had expected. Chapter 5. A New Beginning. The mornings had started to feel different. For weeks, the house had been filled with tension, each day passing like a weight pressing down on Clara's chest. But now, there was something lighter in the air. She could feel it in the way Roderick no longer walked through the hallways, like a man walking into battle. He moved with a certain quietness, an ease that had been absent when he first arrived. He no longer held himself at a distance, and neither did she. In the mornings, as Clara went about her duties, Roderick was there beside her. He still maintained the formal air of a duke, his title forever part of him. But there was a softness in his gestures now, a tenderness that made her view him through different eyes. No longer just the stern, distant man who had come to take control of her life. He was beginning to reveal a man who had been buried beneath the weight of his title and past. That morning, Clara stood by the garden gate, watching the children run through the fields. Henry's laughter filled the air, and Amelia chased after him, her blonde curls bouncing in the sunlight. It was a peaceful sight, one that made Clara's heart swell with pride, but it was also a painful reminder of how much she had fought for this life. The children had been her everything. And yet, Roderick had a right to be part of their future too. She wasn't sure when the shift had begun. At first, Roderick's presence had felt like an invasion, a disruption to the life she had so carefully built. But now, in the quiet moments when the house was still and the children were occupied, Clara found herself reflecting on how much they had begun to understand one another. They had shared more than just words. They had shared silences, moments of understanding that spoke louder than any argument. The walls between them were slowly crumbling, each day bringing them closer to something neither had expected, a partnership. Roderick approached her from behind, his footsteps soft on the gravel. He had been in the study most of the morning, reviewing documents for the estate, but now he stood beside her, looking out over the fields with her. "Henry looks like he's trying to outrun Amelia," Roderick remarked, his voice warm in the cool morning air. Clara chuckled, her eyes never leaving the children. "He's faster than he looks. Amelia will catch up though, she always does." Roderick smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made him seem younger, more relaxed. "She's determined, like her mother." Clara met his gaze then, her heart fluttering at the quiet sincerity in his voice. "She takes after her father too." Edward had that same spark, that drive to keep going no matter what. For a moment, there was only silence between them, the kind of silence that felt like the weight of everything unsaid. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a shared space of understanding. Roderick wasn't trying to fix things or change them, he was just here, with her, accepting what had happened and what was still to come. "I've been thinking," Roderick began, his tone thoughtful, "about the future, about how we move forward." Clara's heart beat a little faster, the calm she had been feeling suddenly replaced by the old wariness. "What do you mean?" Roderick glanced at her, his eyes soft but steady. "I've been thinking about our family, and about how much you've done for Henry and Amelia. You've given them everything, Clara. And I've spent so much time focusing on my duties, my obligations. I've lost sight of what truly matters." Clara didn't know how to respond to that. Roderick, the man who had come to take the children away from her, was now acknowledging everything she had fought for. The shift in his words caught her off guard. "I'm not here to undo what you've built," he continued, "but I do want to be a part of it, not as the Duke, but as their uncle, and as someone who cares for them, for you." Clara's breath caught in her throat. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with something real. "I never thought you'd say that," she whispered. Roderick's gaze softened, and he stepped closer to her. "I never thought I would either. But the more I see of you, of how you've raised them, how you've kept everything together, the more I realize that I don't have all the answers. I can't just come in and take over. But I can help. We can raise them together, without undermining each other's role. You've done more than enough alone, and I want to be there for them, for both of us." Clara turned to face him fully, the weight of his words settling in her chest. She had been so afraid of losing control, of losing her family, but what he was offering wasn't control, it was a partnership. And for the first time, she realized that she didn't have to carry the weight of everything alone anymore. "I don't know how to do this," Clara admitted, her voice quiet but real. "I've spent so long protecting them, and myself. I've kept everyone at arm's length, because I thought if I let anyone in, I'd lose them. But now, I don't know what it would look like to share that with you." Roderick reached out, his hand brushing against hers, a gentle reassurance that spoke volumes. "We don't have to know everything now. We can figure it out together, slowly, one step at a time." The sincerity in his voice, the way his eyes softened as he spoke, made Clara feel something stir deep inside her. It wasn't just the promise of a shared future. It was the recognition that they were both willing to be vulnerable, willing to let go of their own fears in order to create something better. "I think I'd like that," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. I think I'd like to see what we could build together." Roderick smiled then, a slow, quiet smile that filled the space between them with a warmth that felt new. "Then let's start, Clara. Let's start with this." The children came running toward them, their laughter carrying across the fields. Henry, still laughing, grabbed Clara's hand and pulled her toward the garden, with Amelia close behind. Roderick followed them, his stride long and confident as he caught up with Clara. Together, they walked toward the future, one step at a time. And for the first time, Clara didn't feel like she was alone in this. The weight she had carried for so long had shifted, and in its place was something else, something lighter, something hopeful. The love she had fought so hard to protect, the legacy she had kept alive, was still there. But now, it wasn't just hers to protect. It was theirs, together. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this emotional journey. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Your support helps us continue creating more stories of love, redemption, and second chances that matter. At the end of this video, you'll see a suggestion for another of our romantic stories. Click and discover more beautiful tales of courage and connection. With all our gratitude, Duke's Story.